as animals continue to evolve and diversify, we sort of start to see this trend towards larger bodies. And having a larger body comes with many benefits, but it also comes with a lot of problems and issues that these animals need to solve. So that's kind of how we're going to approach this section of the chapter is what are the major problems associated with having a larger body and how do we solve them? But most of these problems really come down to the issue of surface area to volume. So the larger your internal volume, the bigger your body, typically the smaller your surface area is. So the ratio between surface area to volume is relatively low for large-bodied animals. And that's a problem because for a lot of organisms, before we get specialized tissues, before we get specialized organ systems, they simply rely on diffusion. And diffusion requires a large surface area. So the key to animal success for a lot of these problems is finding a way to increase the surface area, but internally increase the surface area. So this first problem is how do animals get energy from their food? How do we maximize the amount of energy that we're able to get from food, right? Because remember, there's more oxygen around now. We're starting to see the development of predatory life cycles. And so how do we maximize the amount of energy we can extract from that food? So for most bilateral animals, they're going to have two openings to their digestive system. So food comes in one side, goes out the other. Basically, food's just passing through. And with two openings, you can continue to eat while the food you ate previously is being digested, right? So we can take a snack even if we're still digesting breakfast, right? But really, what's the whole point of the digestive system, right? The mechanical and chemical breakdown of the food, so that way it can be broken down into the smaller monomers, so that way it can be imported into the cells for cellular respiration to make ATP. Helps with absorption of nutrients, right? Absorption of those monomers into the cells, as well as absorption of other important vitamins and minerals and things like that. And then finally, eliminate whatever can't be digested or isn't useful, right? So the key for this to maximize the amount of energy that can be extracted from food, the amount of food that can be absorbed by the cells is surface area. But especially for animals living on land, that external surface area is not really useful for digestion. So we're going to see an increase in the internal surface area of these animals through the digestive system. And one of those key components is having two openings. Some animals, like sponges, are still filter feeders. They don't have a true digestive system. All of their digestion is done intracellularly. So they capture food with their choanocytes, collar cells, right? Those collar cells then pass off those food vesicles to an amoebocyte, which moves throughout the body of the sponge to carry that food to other parts of the sponge, right? So no true digestive system, not a very efficient process, but they don't have as much energy requirements as other animals. They're not moving, right? They're not predators. They're not having to go out and find their food and move to get to their food. So filter feeding, it's not so bad if you're stuck in one spot, right? Or if you're going to have more of a sessile lifestyle. But for any animals that's moving, you're not going to get enough energy from filter feeding in order to really effectively generate enough energy to contract your muscles to continue to move around. The other type of digestive system that we see, this is only in the cnidarians. They have one opening. They have a gastrovascular cavity where they have a blind gut. Basically, they put food into their gut, digest it, and then they spit whatever can't be digested back out through that same opening. Okay, that's not so bad. At least we have an increase of internal surface area here, right? And then they just use diffusion. They don't really have a circulatory system. They're still just using diffusion to move any sort of digested waste or digested food, nutrients, from the cells lining the gut to the rest of the body. So it's a relatively slow process. And while they're digesting something, while something's in there, they can't bring in more food. Okay? So it really limits the amount of food that they can consume. But these aren't super complex animals. Yes, they're moving. They don't really maintain any sort of homeostasis. Their concentration of salts and solutes inside their cells is basically the same as the ocean. They don't produce any heat to keep themselves warm, right? They're ectothermic. So there's not a lot of homeostasis going on here, or maintaining homeostasis, at least an internal environment that is significantly different from the external environment. And that's where a lot of our energy goes to, really, is movement and homeostasis. And for us as mammals, it goes to our brain too, but not a whole lot going on here, so they don't need a lot of energy to sustain themselves, so this works just fine. Moving more to a bilateral organism, we start to see a complete digestive tract. So food in one side, waste out the other. And so not only does this let this organism continually eat and digest at the same time, but we have a long tube where food will slowly pass through, which maximizes the amount of digestion time. More time spent in the digestive tract, usually the more nutrients that can be broken down and then absorbed by the cells lining that digestive tract. So this is a lot more efficient of a process for extracting nutrients and energy from food than, say, filter feeding or a blind gut. And we start to see specializations of these digestive tracts. They're under really intense selective pressure. Because if you can extract energy from a unique food source, you're going to minimize the competition with other organisms, right? So for instance, we see a wide variety of digestive systems in both the segmented worms, the annelids, as well as insects. And mammals and other vertebrates have their own huge wide diversity of digestive systems, right? But here we have a leech that has a digestive system that is able to expand, so that way when it does get a blood meal, it can bring in a lot of blood at one time, and then that blood can just sit in that digestive system, kind of expands into like the sac, and it can slowly digest it over time. I'm kind of see the same thing here with this mosquito, right? This mosquito has part of its digestive system that can expand to taking a blood meal, and then it can slowly digest it over time. And we start to also see some accessory organs pop up. So like a pharynx where the food goes in, a crop, and a gizzard to help break down that food, some digestive glands to start to secrete enzymes and acid to increase the digestion of that food. And then, as we'll see in vertebrates and mammals later, a really, really long and windy digestive system to massively increase the internal surface area to get the most amount of energy possible. So the major issue here we're trying to solve is getting enough energy out of our food to sustain our lifestyles of being a more predatory and active organism. Digestive systems were under intense selective pressure, and those that had the mutations that led to having a more complex and increased internal surface area of those digestive systems were typically the most successful.